It's 8:40, 20 before 9 o'clock. As Daytona's morning news continues on AM 1150 WNDB, FM 93.5, I'm Dave Lang, back from vacation. Sort of glad to be here. It's hard your first day back, and hopefully I'll get out of here early today. Isn't that funny? Trying to play hooky already, coming right back from vacation. Al Smith is here as well. Michelle Shockley. Al Smith.
Yes, and I want to welcome to the phone on the subject of public pensions. Not a lot of good news out there. It's kind of a ticking time bomb. And in fact, Warren Buffett recently said during the next decade we'll read a lot of news, bad news about public pensions. So I have on the phone Letitia Adams, who is a lobbyist with Florida Chamber. Letitia, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you?
Oh, not bad for a Monday, right? So actually, Greg Lazay, a former colleague of ours here, now working up in Tallahassee, and I know this is an issue. When he was here, he and I covered quite a bit of, and I think it's important that people are aware the issues with public pensions. And if you could speak, let's start with first, just overall in the country, what's your take on where we're at with public pensions, things being done?
I think, as you just mentioned, the Warren Buffett story is kind of a precursor to what you will see, or what we started to see. I think he mentioned things like Detroit and Stockton, California, and Rhode Island and Alabama. It's not. It's hard to say. You don't want to say the roosters have come to nest, but it's a whole lot of really old promises that public officials made a very long time ago are now having to be paid, and economic conditions are not the same, and now the money may or may not be there, and they're finding it hard to keep meeting those obligations. There are obligations that need to be met, definitely, but a lot of cities and municipalities are in a tough spot trying to meet those obligations now.
Yes, and I know the state of Florida is actually, compared to a lot of states, is in pretty good shape. But from the Chamber's perspective, what changes are you looking to be made to make sure these are sustainable over time?
You're correct. The State Board of Administration has done a fantastic job of investing wisely in order to pay the obligations of both the pension side and the 401k side of the retirement system. But what we know is that the pension system in its current size, we're the fourth largest in the country. The pension system is not, as we're watching other systems go down, it's not a sustainable system. What's been done in the past couple of legislative sessions is some legislation to incentivize moves to a 401k system, which currently employees have two options. They have an option to go into the pension plan. They have an option to go into the 401k. We've done legislation to incentivize members to go into the 401k option instead. Unfortunately, we have not been successful with that legislation. So instead, we are still saddled with what is currently a $21.6 billion unfunded liability. And an annual payment right now for the next foreseeable 43 years of about $500 million to go towards that gap.
And what I think is important when we talk about $500 million, that's $500 million that could go towards something else or stay in people's pockets, or I imagine from the chamber,
roads, tax cuts, you name it, absolutely.
From the chamber's perspective, ability to grow business, the least we tax businesses, the better they are able to grow. And I know this also, when we get to when we drill down to local municipalities, Daytona Beach, Port Orange, Ormond, Holly Hill, I know in our community, they're all struggling with this as well. A lot of things got set in place. My opinion is that when the police and the fire unions had a stranglehold on things and were able to get cities to make commitments they're having a difficult time now after this recession of living up to as time goes on. Yeah,
it's a little different than the state situation, but the cities, the municipalities are in no less dire straits. The 99 mandate is, we've been working with the League of Cities to try and help find some type of either revision or elimination of that 99 mandate, and that's the statutory benefit level that mandates, a set limit of benefits for the police and fire that they can't back off of. In economic times, whether they're good or bad, they're stuck at a level that when times are bad, they can't cut back. So what they have to cut back instead on is amenities in your communities. Reduce services, reduce amenities, increased user fees, service taxes. Your garbage rate goes up. Things like that, because they've got to meet that obligation first. And no plan. There's over 500 local pension plans in Florida, and no two plans are the same. And some are doing well. Some are making it work. Some of them have made their own mistakes, and some of them have some flaws. But most of them need some help, and that 99 mandate is a large part of getting to helping them out.
I've been in the private sector my whole life, running businesses, doing different things, or working for, as I do now, for a privately owned company, and we don't get those benefits. I've never was in a position to offer such benefits to people that work for me and working here. That's not really something that's we're able to do. And so the majority of the people in our country work for a small business, so the idea of some type of a pension plan is foreign to us, and the fact that we're having to pay for it for government employees, I think as time goes on, is something people are starting to wake up to.
You are correct. There's two buckets. I mean, there's definitely an obligation that was made to folks many moons ago that needs to be met, and I think at times there's a misconception about that. There is an obligation that needs to be met for the people who are currently in this system, but as we move on, like I said, last year's legislation looked at trying to move new employees into a 401k kind of system, because, like you said, pensions just aren't necessarily they're not a sustainable option anymore. So moving all new employees into a 401k type program is more of a sustainable option as government moves on, as business moves on. It's more feasible, financially feasible, and fiscally sustainable.
Well, so from the city's perspective, and you working as a lobbyist for the chamber, what do you think the next step is? What brave steps need to be made to make these sustainable?
I mean, on the local side, we got really close last year. We really did. It's definitely been a battle. It's always about having the appropriate, or having some legislators step up and be the sponsors of the bill, but then more importantly, having the city officials and the police and fire unions sit down to a table and negotiate how the benefits will be divvied up per se. Because once you eliminate that 99 mandate, there's still all these different levels of benefits that need to be accounted for, and who's going to get what. And we got really close last year. I hope they will go back to the table again and pick up where they left off. Unfortunately, the bills got commingled. They wrapped up the local reform bill with the state reform bill, and as a joint bill, it just wouldn't go. So hopefully we can separate those and maybe at least get local reform across the finish line this coming session. On the state side, I think it's just it's to continue the conversation and continue the education, because every session it helps when municipalities come up and talk about what they're going through. It helps when business owners come and talk about what they're going through, and how the difference between what's being offered at the state level and a business level are just, it's hard for businesses to even compete.
Al Smith on the phone, Tisha Adams, who is a lobbyist of Florida Chamber, talking about pension plans in the state of Florida and also here locally. And I think sometimes people aren't aware as to the amount of the budget. Almost in a lot of municipalities, almost a third of the budget goes towards people who no longer work at the city and to help cover their pension costs. Is what's a lot going on with Detroit, some bold moves being made there. How closely are you and other people involved with this, you looking at what happens at Detroit?
We're definitely looking at what happened in Detroit, but it's hard to point to Detroit, and I mean, you definitely want to take lessons. You want to make sure that you follow everything that happened there and make sure that those same things aren't happening here. but especially with local pensions, it's no two are really the same. Many of the boards are different, so how they're able to get decisions made aren't necessarily the same way that a board here is able to get a decision made.
I guess the reason I'm asking that is the path of bankruptcy and going that route is that, and I know maybe not necessarily here in Florida, but there might be some smaller cities in this state. I know certainly some other states like Illinois and others that really are upside down. If I'm just wondering if this sets a precedent, if this is something that we need to be concerned about.
We definitely look at it, and we've been talking about it. I mean, there is a condition in Florida statutes called financial urgency. There are some cities that have been in and out of the condition of financial urgency due to their pension obligations. They have to go into an agreement with the state. The state basically takes over their books until they can figure out how to pay their obligations or shuffle some money around and make everything okay. But it's definitely a concern. And, there's some cities in South Florida that are in court right now over their pension obligations. So it's very likely. I should hope, fingers are crossed that we don't start seeing bankruptcies left and right. But financial urgency and financial emergency situations are very imminent if we don't get a hold on this thing.
I recently became a grandfather a couple months ago, and I guess it's, put a little more perspective into my life. And one of those things when I look at her and say, well, isn't it irresponsible for our generation to take more, yeah, there was an obligation made, but aren't we taking away from our kids and our grandkids as we move forward on something that's not sustainable if we don't fix this?
Absolutely, because it's going to be your kids and your grandkids' debt that they're walking around with.
Right, we're creating debt for them, right? We're asking them to pay for, something that really isn't sustainable.
Absolutely.
Letitia Adams, thanks so much, lobbyist at Florida Chamber. Appreciate you being our guest here today on Daytona's Morning News.
Thank you for having me.